Be me, Huxley. Closing in on 30, making a living pushing code at a comfortably average tech firm. It's steady work, enough complexity to keep my brain engaged, enough stability to sleep at night. My routine rarely changes. Build features, shut the laptop, disappear into games, or grab a beer with Peyton when the week's done. Peyton's on the QA side, razor sharp, brutally honest, and incapable of sugarcoating anything. Basically, my personality's inverse. I prefer staying under the radar. Deliver what's assigned, cash the check, sidestep unnecessary noise. For the most part, the office stayed calm. No theatrics, no daily explosions. Just a bunch of tech people, men and women, working on projects. We all got along. People would talk about their weekends by the coffee machine, complain about bugs, and then go back to their desks. It was a functional, professional environment. No weirdness, no politics. That all changed a few months back. We got an email. Please welcome our new head of human resources. Her name was Serafina. The email had her picture. Big smile, sharp business suit. Looked professional enough. Her bio was a wall of text filled with corporate buzzwords. Fostering inclusive paradigms. Synergizing diverse workplace ecosystems. Proactive cultural wellness. Peyton leaned over my cubicle wall after reading it. He just said, well, it was nice while it lasted. I told him to give her a chance. Maybe she's just really into the corporate lingo. That optimism lasted about a week. The first thing she did was schedule a series of mandatory workplace sensitivity seminars. We all had to sit in the conference room for 2 hours while a consultant she hired talked at us. The entire presentation was about things like unconscious bias and microaggressions. It was all very vague. Lots of accusations, no solutions other than be more aware. The tone was clearly pointed at the men in the room. We were the ones who needed to check our privilege and be mindful of the space we occupy. A few of the women in the office seemed really into it, nodding along at every point. Most people, guys and girls, just looked bored and wanted to get back to work. After the seminar, new posters started appearing all over the office. Brightly colored signs with phrases like, "Is your language inclusive?" and "Think, speak, respect." It felt less like an office and more like a college dorm. Peyton started calling the break room the re-education lounge. The atmosphere started to shift. It was subtle at first. People became more careful about what they said. The casual banter by the coffee machine died down. Everyone was worried they'd say the wrong thing and get called into the new HR office. Then came the all-hands meeting. Serafina stood at the front of the room, beaming with an almost religious fervor. Our director, a guy who usually just hides in his office and signs paychecks, was standing next to her looking deeply uncomfortable. She started by talking about her vision for the company, a place of absolute psychological safety, a workplace free from the lingering shadows of patriarchal assumptions. Then she dropped the bomb. She announced a new accountability and transparency initiative. She said that despite the seminars, she was still receiving anonymous feedback about a persistent culture of male-centric behavior. No examples, of course, just vague allusions to discomfort and unspoken tensions. Therefore, to protect the well-being of all employees and ensure total accountability, a new policy was being implemented. Effective immediately, all male employees would be required to wear a company-issued body camera during work hours. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the industrial carpet. I just stared at her, trying to process what I just heard. A body cam, like a cop. I looked over at Peyton. His face was a mask of pure, unfiltered disbelief. The cameras, she explained, would record all interactions. The footage would be uploaded to a secure server at the end of each day. She, as head of HR, would have the authority to review the footage at her discretion, especially if any issues were reported. She framed it as a good thing for us. "This will protect you from false accusations," she said with a sweet smile, "and it will provide an opportunity for coaching and personal growth." Peyton's hand shot up. Serafina called on him, her smile tightening just a little. Peyton's voice was calm, but sharp. He asked if there had been any specific verifiable incidents to warrant such an extreme targeted measure. She didn't miss a beat. She replied that HR operates on a principle of proactivity, not reactivity. She said the absence of formal complaints doesn't mean there isn't a problem, just that people might feel too intimidated to speak up. This policy, she claimed, would empower them. Then another male colleague asked why the policy only applied to men. Her smile vanished completely. She went on a long, winding speech about historical power dynamics and systemic imbalances, that men, as a group, hold a position of structural advantage and therefore bear a greater burden of responsibility to ensure the comfort of others. It was a masterclass in corporate non-answers. Everyone knew what this was. It wasn't about safety. It was about control and suspicion. We were all being treated as pre-criminals. I looked at the director, hoping he'd step in and say something, anything. He just cleared his throat, stared at the floor, and mumbled about the importance of embracing new management strategies and supporting HR's vision. He was a total coward. He was terrified of her. The meeting ended. The men all just sat there for a moment in stunned silence. The women were split. A few looked genuinely excited and empowered by this. Others looked just as uncomfortable and shocked as we were. One of the senior female engineers later quietly told me she thought it was a crazy, humiliating idea, but she wasn't going to say that out loud and get on the new HR lady's bad side. The next morning, there was a box of body cameras on a table by the entrance. Each one was labeled with our names. Putting it on felt surreal. A small black box clipped to my shirt, a tiny green light indicating it was on. The first day was a nightmare. The office was a ghost town of whispers. Every conversation felt stilted and artificial. You could feel the paranoia in the air. Guys who used to joke around were now silent, communicating only through work-related emails and instant messages. Even asking a simple question felt like a risk. What if your tone was misinterpreted? What if you accidentally stood too close to someone's desk? It was a perfect tool for destroying any and all social cohesion. Productivity tanked. How can you collaborate on a complex coding problem when you're afraid to even speak freely? At lunch, all the guys went out together, something we rarely did. We found a diner a few blocks away and just vented. Everyone was furious, but we felt completely powerless. Quitting wasn't an option for most of us. Good jobs in this field are hard to come by. We were stuck. To make matters worse, I got an email from the director that afternoon. Since I had the most experience with server management in our department, I was being given an additional responsibility. At the end of each week, I was to collect the data from all the body cams, upload it, and archive it on a new dedicated server. Just what I wanted. Spending my Friday afternoons managing terabytes of footage of my colleagues and me being miserable. The first week crawled by. The atmosphere just got worse. Serafina would walk through the office with a serene smile, as if she were a benevolent warden observing her perfectly behaved prisoners. She'd make a point of having loud, cheerful conversations with the female employees, while her interactions with any of the men were curt and formal. Friday came, and everyone dumped their camera's memory cards into a box on my desk. I stayed late, long after everyone else had gone home, and started the tedious process of uploading and archiving. It was just as soul-crushing as I imagined. Click, drag, drop, wait for the upload, repeat. I was hours into it, my eyes glazing over from staring at the progress bars. I was processing the footage from my own camera. I scrubbed through a file from earlier that day just to find a specific timestamp I needed for my log. The clip was of me walking over to Serafina's office to ask a question about the new expense report procedures she'd implemented. On the video, I walk up, ask my question politely. She answers, barely looking up from her screen. I say thanks and walk away. A completely boring professional interaction. But I didn't stop the video right away. As my video self walked back to my desk, the camera on my chest was still pointed in her general direction. The audio was still recording. I saw her watch me go. Then she rolled her eyes so hard I'm surprised they didn't fall out of her head. She leaned over to a female colleague who sat near her, another one of her new office allies. And clear as day, the camera's microphone picked up what she whispered. Ugh, the passive aggression is just dripping off him. It's textbook male fragility. He can't stand having a woman in a position of authority. I just froze. My heart started pounding. I replayed it 3 times. There it was. The entire justification for this insane policy was that we, the men, were creating a hostile environment. And here was the policy's creator, caught on her own system, doing exactly that, making a derogatory sexist assumption about me based on nothing more than a simple work question. My first instinct was pure rage. I wanted to storm into the director's office on Monday morning and slap the memory card down on his desk. But then I thought about it. What would happen? The director would panic. He'd probably try to bury it. Serafina would deny it, twist it, say it was taken out of context. She'd claim I was retaliating against her because I was a sexist who couldn't handle her authority, proving her point. It would be my word and my illegally reviewed footage against the head of HR. I would be fired so fast my head would spin. No, that wasn't the way. I saved a copy of the video file to a personal encrypted USB drive. Then I continued my work, my mind racing. On Monday, I walked into the office and saw Peyton by the coffee machine. I gestured for him to follow me to a small, empty meeting room. I didn't say a word, just plugged the USB drive into the conference room laptop and played the clip. He watched it, his expression going from curious to grim. He watched it a second time. When it was over, he just looked at me and said, "So it begins." He wasn't surprised at all. He said he knew, from the very beginning, that this wasn't about our conduct. It was about her power. His advice was simple and ruthless. Don't do anything. Not yet. She thinks she's untouchable. She thinks she's holding all the cards. Let her believe it. My new weekly task wasn't a burden anymore. It was an opportunity. "You are now the office archivist of her hypocrisy," he told me. "Just sit back, do your job, and let her hang herself. She will." He was right. So, that's what I did. I continued my work. I wore the camera every day. I was polite and professional to everyone, including Serafina, and every Friday I stayed late and sifted through the digital evidence. I wasn't snooping, not really. I was just doing the job I was assigned. I would look for my own footage first, checking for any interactions involving her. Then I started noticing things in the footage from the other guys' cameras too. A pattern began to emerge. Serafina in a meeting, recorded by the camera of a colleague sitting opposite her. A female project manager makes a good point. Serafina praises her for her assertiveness and leadership. 10 minutes later, a male engineer makes a similarly assertive point. After the meeting, the camera catches Serafina telling another manager that the male engineer has an aggressive tone and needs to be coached on his collaborative skills. Double standard. Save the clip. Another time, Peyton's camera caught a conversation near the break room. Serafina was laughing with two other women. She was talking about one of the older guys in accounting. She said, "You have to explain everything to him like he's 5. I swear men are deaf to any instructions that aren't about sports or cars." A blatantly sexist joke. The kind of thing that would have gotten any of us fired instantly if we'd said it about a woman. Save the clip. It kept happening, week after week. The cameras were supposed to be watching us, but because they were always on, they were inadvertently watching her. Her guard was completely down. She was so convinced of her own moral superiority and the guilt of every man in the office that she never once considered that the surveillance system she built was a two-way street. I had a growing collection of clips, all neatly organized in a folder on my encrypted drive. Peyton and I would review them sometimes. It was like watching a villain monologue in a movie, revealing their whole evil plan because they think the hero is already defeated. The office morale was in the toilet. We lost 2 good developers who just got fed up and quit. Projects were falling behind schedule. The director was too spineless to do anything, and Serafina kept writing reports blaming the delays on a lack of male engagement and resistance to new cultural paradigms. She was creating a problem and then using the consequences of that problem as justification for her own authority. It was insane. I was just biding my time, waiting for the right moment. I was waiting for the one clip, the smoking gun, the one piece of evidence so undeniable that even our cowardly director couldn't ignore it. I knew she'd slip up eventually. Her arrogance was a ticking clock. And a couple of months into this dystopian nightmare, she finally did. It was a Thursday evening. I had to stay late to finish up a critical patch before a deadline. The office was mostly empty, just me, a couple of other coders, and Serafina in her office. Around 7 p.m., I got up to get some coffee. As I walked down the hallway towards the kitchen, my body cam was, as always, silently recording. The door to one of the small conference rooms was slightly ajar. Serafina was in there, on a video call on her laptop. She was talking loudly, assuming no one was around to hear. My path took me right past the open door. For the 5 or 6 seconds it took me to walk past, my camera captured a perfect unobstructed view into the room, and the microphone picked up every single word of what she was saying. She was talking to someone on the screen, someone I didn't recognize, and I heard my own name. My blood ran cold. I stopped just past the door, out of sight, and just listened for a second. I heard her laugh, a sharp, unpleasant sound. Then she said it, the line that would change everything. I heard her laugh, a sharp, unpleasant sound. Then she said it, the line that would change everything. So, the beauty of it is, I don't even need a real reason. The narrative is already in place. I've been documenting his uncooperative attitude and subtle resistance to female leadership for weeks. Another month of this, and I'll have a file thick enough to justify his termination to corporate. They won't even question it. It's Huxley I'm talking about, by the way. My entire body went rigid. I could hear the person on the other end of the call say something indistinct. Then Serafina's voice cut through again, dripping with smug satisfaction. Oh, absolutely. Performance has nothing to do with it. He's competent, I'll give him that. But he represents the exact kind of stagnant male energy we're trying to phase out. His silence is defiance, you know? It's incredibly passive-aggressive. I need to make an example of someone to show the others I'm serious about cultural reform. Once he's gone, I have a fantastic candidate to recommend for his position. A woman of color, brilliant, a perfect fit for the new culture we're building here. The director is so scared of being called a bigot he'll approve whatever I put in front of him. It's almost too easy. I couldn't hear anymore. I forced my legs to move, walking silently and slowly away, down the hall to the kitchen. I poured a cup of coffee I didn't want, my hand shaking slightly. It wasn't just a personal dislike. It was a calculated, discriminatory plan to get me fired based on my gender and race, using fabricated evidence of passive aggression as a pretext. She was using the very system of corporate accountability and anti-discrimination she pretended to champion as a weapon to do something deeply, fundamentally discriminatory. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. I went back to my desk, my mind a blank slate of cold fury. I finished my work on autopilot, my code compiling without a single error, a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I was the last one to leave the office that night. Before I left, I went to the server closet. I took the memory card out of my camera. I made 3 separate backups of that video file, one on my encrypted USB drive, one on a hidden partition on my home PC's hard drive, and one uploaded to a secure, private cloud storage account. I wasn't taking any chances. I barely slept that night. I just kept replaying her words in my head. It's almost too easy. The next morning, I looked like I hadn't slept at all. Peyton took one look at me and knew something was wrong. "You got it, didn't you?" he asked in a low voice. I just nodded. We booked the same small meeting room as before. I didn't even give a preamble. I just played the clip. The audio was crystal clear. Her voice filled the small room, arrogant and self-assured as she laid out her entire plot. Peyton listened without a single change in his expression. His face was like stone. When the clip ended, he was silent for a full minute. Then he looked at me. "All right," he said. "War." He started pacing the small room, thinking out loud. He said going to the director was out. The director would have a panic attack and try to bury it. He'd probably offer me a generous severance package with a rock-solid NDA to make me go away quietly. The problem would be solved for him, but Serafina would stay. The cameras would stay. And she'd just pick a new target. Going to a lawyer was an option, but a bad one. It would be long, drawn out, and expensive. The company would throw its legal team at me, and it would become a years-long battle of attrition. We needed to do something that was fast, decisive, and left them with no option but to take our side. The situation, he explained, required a strategy of mutually assured destruction. We had to create a scenario where covering it up would be more damaging to the company than firing Serafina and admitting the whole policy was a catastrophic failure. The target wasn't just Serafina anymore. It was the entire cowardly system that enabled her. The plan we devised was simple in its concept, but required careful execution. I was the archivist. I had access to everything. This wasn't just about her plan to fire me anymore. It was about the entire pattern of behavior. I spent the whole weekend locked in my apartment, fueled by coffee and a burning sense of injustice. I went through all the footage I had saved. I wasn't just looking for clips of her. I was building a narrative. I started the video with a simple text slide, a record of the Accountability and Transparency Initiative. Then I began. Clip 1, her announcing the body cam policy, talking about creating psychological safety. Clip 2, a quick montage of men looking uncomfortable and awkward, walking around the office with the cameras on. The dead, silent atmosphere. Clip 3, the double standard in the meeting, her praising a woman for being assertive, then criticizing a man for the same behavior, calling it aggressive. I put the two moments side by side for maximum impact. Clip 4, her sexist joke about men not being able to follow instructions unless it was about cars. Clip 5, the clip of her denying a male employee time off for a doctor's appointment while approving a vague mental health day for a female employee just minutes later. I added more. Little moments of condescension, eye-rolling, and whispered insults, all caught by the very system she had created. It was a symphony of hypocrisy. And then, the finale. I let the final clip play in its entirety. The raw, unfiltered audio of her in the conference room, laying out her discriminatory plot to get me fired and replace me with her preferred candidate. I ended the video with a final text slide. Who is being held accountable? The final video was just under 5 minutes long. It was concise, brutal, and undeniable. There was no context that could possibly excuse what was on that recording. Meanwhile, Peyton had been doing his own work. He was a master of online research. He spent the weekend digging through corporate databases, social media, and professional networking sites. By Sunday night, he had a list. It wasn't just our local director's email address. He had the email for the regional vice president of operations. He had the email for the chief technology officer at our corporate headquarters. He had the email for the chief operating officer. He had the email for the company's CEO. He even had the direct address for the head of the entire global HR department, Serafina's ultimate boss. This was going straight to the top. We were going to bypass our local chain of command entirely and set off a 5-alarm fire in the executive suite. On Monday, we did nothing. We went to work, wore our cameras, and acted as if it were just another day in paradise. We needed to pick our moment. We decided on Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Enough time for everyone to have settled in and had their morning coffee, but early enough in the day for the fallout to spread and become uncontainable before anyone could go home. That Tuesday morning, my hands were sweating. Peyton and I met in the break room for a moment. He just gave me a single determined nod. I went back to my desk. I opened a new, anonymous, encrypted email account we had created over the weekend. The recipient list was long, filled with the email addresses of some of the most powerful people in our company. For the subject line, I typed, "Footage from the Our Office Location Accountability Initiative." In the body of the email, I wrote only one sentence. The following footage was recorded on company-issued equipment as part of a mandatory HR policy. I attached the 5-minute video file. My cursor hovered over the send button. I took a deep breath. This was it. Either I was about to be fired and blacklisted from the industry, or I was about to trigger a corporate earthquake. I clicked send. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. The office hummed along with its usual tense quietness. I tried to work, but I couldn't focus. I just stared at my screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. Peyton was pretending to run a diagnostic, but I could see he was just as tense as I was. Then, it started. The phone on the desk of a senior manager rang. It was a sharp, sudden sound in the quiet office. He answered it, his expression going from neutral to confused to alarmed in the space of about 30 seconds. He kept saying, "Yes, I understand," and "I'm looking into it now." He hung up, his face pale. A minute later, another manager's phone rang. Same thing. Then, through the glass wall of his office, we all saw the director's desk phone light up. He answered. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but we could see him. His posture changed. He sat bolt upright. He started gesturing wildly. He ran a hand through his hair, looking panicked. He slammed the phone down. Before it even settled in the cradle, his computer chimed with a video call notification. He accepted it instantly. We could see him on the call, getting visibly berated by someone on the other end. He was nodding frantically, looking like a schoolboy being scolded by the principal. The call ended. He immediately stood up and strode out of his office, speed-walking directly to Serafina's desk. She looked up at him, surprised. He didn't say anything out loud. He just crooked his finger, a silent command. "My office? Now!" She got up, a look of annoyance on her face, and followed him. She walked into his office with the same confident, untouchable air she always had. The door closed. The entire office was now pretending not to watch, but everyone was watching. You could feel the collective tension. No one was typing. No one was talking. We just waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. We couldn't hear anything through the door, but we could see their silhouettes through the frosted glass. We could see angry, sharp movements. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, the door opened. The director stood there, his face ashen. Serafina walked out. The change was staggering. The confident, smug aura was gone, completely shattered. Her face was a blotchy red mess. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of pure shock and incandescent fury. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She didn't look at anyone. Her gaze was fixed on the floor in front of her. She walked to her desk in a dead, robotic silence. She picked up the small cardboard box she kept under her desk for personal items. With trembling hands, she began to place her things into it. A frame picture, a mug, a stack of books. The director stood by her desk, arms crossed, watching her every move. A silent, grim-faced guard. When she was done, she picked up the box. She didn't say a word. She didn't look back. She walked the long walk from her desk to the office entrance. Every single person in the office watched her go. It was the most deafening silence I have ever experienced. The director escorted her all the way to the elevator, stood there until the doors closed, and then turned and walked back to his office without a word, shutting the door behind him. A collective, unspoken sigh of relief seemed to pass through the entire office. It was over. The rest of the day was a blur of whispered conversations and speculation. Peyton and I said nothing. We just worked. We didn't have to say anything. The next morning, the director called another all-hands mandatory meeting. He stood at the front of the conference room, looking 10 years older than he did the day before. He looked exhausted, humiliated, and utterly defeated. He announced that Serafina was no longer with the company, effective immediately. Then he did something I never thought he was capable of. He apologized. He looked directly at the male employees in the room. He said the Accountability and Transparency Initiative was a misguided and deeply flawed policy. He said it was an error in judgment to approve it, and that it created a hostile and divisive environment. He formally apologized for the suspicion and humiliation it had caused. Then he announced that the policy was terminated, effective immediately. He told us to take off the body cameras and leave them on the conference room table. The feeling in that room was electric. One by one, we unclipped the small black boxes and placed them on the table. It felt like being unshackled. The pile of cameras on the table grew into a monument of a failed, toxic ideology. When the meeting was over, things felt different. The tension that had choked the office for months was gone. People were talking again. The sound of casual conversation, and even a few jokes started to return. A few of the guys came by my desk throughout the day and just gave me a quiet nod, a gesture of thanks. They knew. They didn't know how, but they knew. The women who had been her staunchest supporters were now silent and kept to themselves. The other women, the ones who had always seemed uncomfortable with the policy, looked just as relieved as we did. Things in the office slowly started to return to normal. Actually, better than normal. We had all been through a collective ordeal, and it had, strangely, brought us closer. There was a new sense of mutual respect. I never told anyone, besides Peyton, what I did. There was no need. A few weeks later, Peyton and I were grabbing a beer after work. He raised his glass. "To radical accountability," he said, a huge grin on his face. I clinked my glass against his. I didn't start this fight. I never wanted any part of it. I just wanted to be left alone to do my job. But when I was pushed into a corner and threatened with the loss of my livelihood for no reason other than who I am, I learned something. Sometimes the only way to deal with a bully who hides behind a system is to use that very system to tear them down. She built the weapon, she loaded it and pointed it at us. She just never imagined it could be turned around to fire back.